And here is the latest installment of Ezekiel Kralen's story, at least up to mid-January, a little past mid-January. Many months behind where he is in the story, but I'm never going to catch up, but it doesn't make any difference as long as you're following along. You Sissy Fags Give Me a Headache is the title of this story by Ezekiel Kralen. Email correspondence, January 17th and 19th. Subject, last night's meetup was spectacular. Date, January 17th. Even though he didn't show up until 11:30 p.m. First thing I noticed was the fabulously plump dark green sleeping bag upon which the pups rested, much better than the ones I could afford, so I'd say its value was around $60 or more. Didn't say where he got it, nor did I ask. I was just very pleased, as were Lucky and Flacco, of course. As soon as she saw me step out, Flacco flipped on her back and started squirming in silly delight, tongue hanging out. So I scritched her tummy, while Lucky pressed himself against my thigh as I pet and scritched him too. After feeding and watering the hounds, Deke said he's going to take a 5 or 7 minute walk, so stay with him, so I likewise enjoyed the comfy padding of the bag, while lying partly down to embrace and kiss the pups. I also brought them some doggy snacks stashed upstairs, which they enjoyed immensely, but I never do that when their master is around. Deke returned within 15 minutes and began talking about Scampy, who was recently given a room several days ago and shares with her boyfriend. "She's missing," he exclaimed. "She doesn't want to stay there, so now they're looking for her. It's been 2 days now, but I'm sure she's all right." "I'm sure she is, too," I replied, "but it must be hard on her boyfriend." "Well, he's kind of her boyfriend," Deke reflected. "Scampy always keeps her options open for anyone better to come along." Now, mind you, Watson, Scampy is a homeless woman in her mid-40s with half her teeth missing and the other half rotting and broken, and she often babbles incoherently and regularly bursts into screeching paroxysms against imaginary protagonists, though may indeed have been real in a more tumultuous past, which I believe is the case. But I guess she keeps her standards up in her own convoluted way. I can't imagine who this boyfriend is, what he looks like, and how he behaves, so perhaps that's for the best, speaking for my own sanity. "She just wants to be left alone. They're forcing her to live indoors," he blurted. "I don't think so, Deke," I calmly disagreed. "Sounds to me like they're doing their best to help her out. If they were forcing her, they'd put her in handcuffs and take her back. Searching for her is not forcing her to do anything. They're driving through neighborhoods looking for homeless people and offering them $50 or $100 to get them off the streets if they just come with them and leave all their stuff behind," Dick continued. "I know some dudes who got a room that way, and they're now on GA and work 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, cleaning up the streets. Some of them like it, some don't." "Sounds like a good deal, if you ask me," I replied. "I don't want to work. I can't work." "They won't put you on GA, Deke," I attempted to explain. "You'll probably get SSI instead and be deemed unemployable, like me." "But they'll still force me to go to appointments and do other stuff I don't want to do," he bristled. "No, Deke," I replied, "the appointments will come to you, and they won't be that frequent at all. You act like they'd throw you into prison instead of giving you a safe, warm place to live where you're free to come and go. You're just afraid of change. But I bet you'll wind up liking the new situation more than you think right now. You might even make friends with some others there. I know the dogs will be crazy happy in their new digs, and that should be important to you. Get them off of these cold, nasty streets. They may not survive another winter like this." Anyway, this went on a few more minutes before a black and skinny 40-ish dude pulled up to Deke on a bicycle, and they had their own conversation while I resumed attending to the pups cuddled by my side. And I snapped out of worry mode, reminding myself he's going to be just fine. Things will fall into place for him soon enough. No need to feel aggravated over his notorious little dramas. They were standing just 8 feet away on the other side of the shopping cart, so I could listen if I wanted. At one point, the black fellow, let's call him Booker, went off on a rant about the word friend, how it's meaningless when so many people who play your friend turn around and stab you in the back. The word's useless. It's got to be a better word than friend. "Comrade," Deke offered up. Booker laughed at that, and "Yeah, that'll work," then proclaimed, "I'm not out here in the Castro looking to make comrades. I'm looking to make money." I guess by that he meant selling drugs, maybe just pot, I don't know. probably pills or tabs of acid or that old standby crystal. But I liked his demeanor and his way with words, so stood up, approached him, and added my own 2 cents. You're right. First thing an evil person does is call you a friend. Then he'll start using your name a lot to lasso you in. Hey, John, this, and hey, John, that. They have ruined the very essence of what friendship is. Our chit-chat quickly turned into his stating that a lot of people think this world's going to hell in a handbasket, but he thinks things are actually improving. And I said, well, things have gotten pretty bad for many of these days, but I think we'll finally hit bottom a bit later this year, and then things will start moving fast in a better direction. But your words are right on, and I agree. There'll be something like a rising up, an awakening. He smiled, and a gold tooth glinted under the street lamp. Yeah, that's how I see it, too. Somewhere in our brief conversation, I used the adjective extraordinary, to which he astutely replied, that's another word that bothers me. Extraordinary. Well, I replied, it's just 2 words put together, but not pronounced the way it's spelled. Yeah, but what does it really mean when you break it down? Extra mediocre? I cracked up over that witty remark and then returned to sit by the pups and thanked him for his encouraging words, for they affirmed my own visions unbidden. Booker took off around 10 minutes later, and when he did, I told Deke, that guy who was just here, he is very smart. Anyone who can talk about the English language like that has got to be. Though I suppose Deke is smarter than he lets on, considering his evoking the word comrade on the fly. I suspect he intentionally dumbs it down when he's around me, in his role as my bodhisattva trickster, to hurl one challenge at me after another, the main one being to rise above anger and frustration, which he attempts to trigger, and I think I'm doing very well these days in that department. It was a great meet-up all in all, as he did not raise his voice in anger at any time, expressing his probably fake fears and frustrations without flying off the handle, and he listened to my input with consideration instead of cutting me off, so that is why I call last night's visit spectacular. He picked up his speaker much later today than usual, and I delivered it to him for the first time in weeks without being cloaked in a trash bag. Here's a picture of its top, where you can see the tape I placed on the upper and lower left corners to cover those cracks from where he dropped it. Click here for a larger view. He left very quickly, claiming once more to be in a hurry to get somewhere. Tried to get me to run up and down the stairs as I brought the pups food and water, then a fresh supply of victuals, but I took my time anyway, told him, cut it out. You're not in a rush to go anywhere. You're not the big shot you pretend to be. This did not set him off in a tantrum, as such a retort surely would have up to the recent past, but he gave me bare seconds to greet the pups and give them hugs before they scampered off to wherever, probably 3 or 4 blocks away, where he settled down to relax a while and deny me the Brindlekin's company. As for Spike Kurlovsky, I forgot to mention he sent me 2 private emails within the same week recently. He rarely posts directly to me, but when he does, it's always some hateful anti-gay threats and insults, until these last 2, which were downright innocuous. The last one said, why don't you find a mailing list in Portland or Seattle and leave us alone? I forgot what his words were in the previous email, but it was equally and surprisingly gentle. A bodhisattva clue that soon the antagonism is coming to a close, and an implication that he and Tanya were in on this overlong harassment together, not out of genuine hostility, but to challenge and test my mettle. Needless to say, I nonetheless did not reply to him, but simply deleted the unwelcome mail, and just days after that, Tanya posted her clear reprimand against his constant rants and bullying. Interesting timing, as it occurred parallel to Deke's increasingly quiescent behavior, less and less rough bumps and more smooth sailing. Subject: another good meet-up with craziness at the end. Date: January 19th. Yesterday, a mellow afternoon, pleasantly cool with burnished sunlight streaming down. I sat outside with the pups on their cushy sleeping bag for about an hour and a half while Deke took off to parts wherever. After I gave him $50 in advance of this Sunday's allowance, mind you. He left his shopping cart behind, too, which made a nice backrest as I listened to some scary tales on my BLU smartphone. Excuse me just a moment. Listened to some scary tales on my BLU smartphone, which connected to my Xfinity service just fine. But I didn't really need it, as the stories were already downloaded. So I got to enjoy their darling company again, feed them some tasty treats. Only Flacco ate them, though, as Lucky was more interested in sleeping while snuggled deep in the folded bag. But for most of the time, brother and sister both hunkered down in comfort, with the addition of a child's sleeping bag I brought down from my room to toss over them. Not that they needed it for the cold, as the weather was mild, but they rest better in the warm darkness of a makeshift little cave. No distractions to disturb their peace. I guess they feel safer with a top cover to hide beneath. I know I do. Deke returned with a bicycle and a jacket he said he purchased in Chinatown. He also said, "See, I wasn't gone that long." "No, you weren't. Thanks," I replied. "You could have taken another hour and it still would have been fine with me." Now that he was back, my sitting was done, and I returned hovel, knowing Deke would be annoyed if I remained with the dog, since he uses the time out front to hook up with some of his street friends and or customers. Sure enough, in less than a half hour, 2 other vagrants appeared and parked close by. One stretched out across the sidewalk on Deke's right, his upper back slanted against the cart, the other sitting cross-legged toward Deke's left and painting on a square thin board set flat on the sidewalk. Nothing interesting, though, just muddy blotches of color with some burrito content spread across it for texture and a 3D effect. The pups remained curled up in the folds of the blanket through their master's entire visit, and I was glad to see that. Sometime after 7 p.m., Deke called to me to bring down his JBL Party Box 300 and his smartphone. Knowing it was going to rain later that night, I covered the monster speaker with 2 trash bags, one from the bottom up, the other from the top down, and lugged it downstairs and out the front gate. When he stepped forward to pick up the speaker and place it atop the shopping cart, I told him, "It's going to rain tonight," so I put, "I don't want to hear it," he exploded in a fury. "You always ruin my day when I see you." Those 2 visiting vagrants were still around, but they were too far out of it to show any reaction to his outburst, which went on for an impressive several minutes. These are all in capital letters, these outbursts that Zeke is writing about. Said things like, "I don't give a fuck about the weather. You sissy fags give me a headache. Get out of my face, drama queen. Go back upstairs." He really piled on the insults, mocking me with a lisp while saying he's so sorry to have bothered Your Highness, etc. Meanwhile, through it all, I remained calm while telling him he's the drama queen. All I did was tell him it's going to rain tonight, so figured I'd protect his speaker. "All right, I don't care any more about your fucking speaker," declared this befuddled pilgrim, and removed the trash bags. "I hope they do get soaked." He demanded them back a few minutes later, but I resisted, clenching them crunched up in my hand while proceeding to enter through the front gate. But then I noticed Flacco and Lucky just standing around looking up at me with concern. So I came up to them and gave them attentive hugs and scritches while Deke prepared to depart. "Get out of my way, you're blocking the shopping cart," he ordered, so I stood back up and waved the trash bags close to his face. "Here, take them." For I observed him grinning with a wry smile during his yet another wacky outburst, thus realizing he's just having a bit of fun at my expense. After pushing his cart a few yards forward, he stopped to finish cleaning up what debris remained. "I'll take care of that," I said. "I don't mind. Just get out of here, please. I don't want a creep like you hanging out front." After picking up what little mess there was, including the painted canvas with burrito guts, I saw that Deke had paused for a while, just around the corner, and Lucky was writhing on his back with glee, so I approached the dogs, sat down on the sidewalk, and they clambered all over my legs and lap with delightful abandon. Their master spoke not a word to me, but continued his conversation with another indigent standing nearby. After several minutes of this puppy tryst, I wished them all an excellent evening, upon which Deke resumed his lisping mockery. "Good night, creep," I replied, then returned back hovel, where I breathed a sigh of relief and finally got to sit down and enjoy my dinner, which by then had grown cold. About an hour later, the rain commenced, at first a sprinkle, but then a gully washer for 20 minutes or so before it stopped. Merciful heaven, what an ordeal the holiday season has been, cursed as it was by a string of 9 atmospheric rivers, last night's being a final brief gasp. So glad it's all over at last. Conclusion, our latest meetup was again superb overall. Perhaps I've lowered my standards out of sheer exhaustion. Is this what Stockholm Syndrome looks like? Yeah, I think you're right there about that, Zeke.